Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys saw in the last video, we had some issues on the dyno, and unfortunately, we have to resolve the fueling issues with the car. The car drives just fine. I drove home. It's about a 45-minute drive. We drove home just fine. The stock fuel pump's working just fine. It's producing 58 psi. It's working great. It's the secondary fuel system where we're having our trouble. So anything above 4,000 RPM and, well, 5 psi, which is probably about 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. Anything above that, the secondary fuel pump is kicking on, but above in the high RPM band, it's dropping fuel pressure. So as we said in the last video, we're going to do a couple things to help hopefully resolve this issue. So we're going to add a -6 fitting in between here with a fuel gauge on it, run the hose up to here, and we'll put a manual fuel pressure gauge up here on the window. We'll just run it, throw it underneath the windshield wiper, and be able to tell what our fuel pressure is. So that's the first thing. I have the AN fitting on order that should be here, and I'm going to pick up that gauge over the weekend. The second thing that I found in my research was that the stock fuel system, the wire harness for it is like 14 gauge. It's really thin, and anytime you're making any kind of power, we can actually overpower the stock fuel pump. So a lot of people suggested on Corvette forum to actually go to Racetronix and pick up one of their basically hot wire fuel pump kits. And that's what this is right here. This is from Racetronix. It is a 2003 newer C6 Corvette plug and play fuel pump wiring hot wire kit. And it basically what it does is it's going to take, you see that red wire right there? That's going to go to the alternator. That wire is going to run down through the driver's side footwell, the rocker panel, come up, and then plug into the fuel pump harness back there. And this wiring kit will have direct 12 volts coming direct from the alternator. So we should be good. And actually, that's the same way we have the secondary fuel pump wired up as well. It's coming right off the alternator, going through the car, and going right to the pump. So we'll basically be having that same setup for the stock fuel pump. So we're going to get that installed today, and the next item that we're going to review real quick is actually more of a starting issue than a fuel pressure issue. And what that is when we set up this external fuel pump last year, we have it coming out of the tank going into a fuel filter, the dash 8 lines going into the top of the Deechworks pump, line coming out of the Deechworks pump, and then going into the fuel line. You can't see it, but there is basically a T-fitting over in the fuel pump. And what we forgot to install was a check valve. I don't know how I missed it, but ECS, ANA, all the guys that make their, that sell these aftermarket external fuel pump setups, they all have a check valve in it that are before the fuel pump, not after. So what we're going to be doing is adding a check valve in this AN line, this PTFO hose setup. So in the time being, I may just replace the fuel filter right there. That's from Russell. The check valve is going to be from Russell as well. I may just swap it right there and see if this works out. And to help diagnose our fuel pressure issue, as you guys saw in the previous video with the dyno video, I went and picked up one of these glow shift, pretty generic fuel pressure gauges. We're pretty much going to install this in the same spot where PCM had tied into the fuel line for the mechanical gauge. I decided just to go pick up a Russell -8 NPT fitting to a -6. So this is the -6, the black fitting, that's from Russell. And then we've got the fuel pressure sending unit. This is from Glow Shift. And to seal the threads, I actually used the same thread sealant that I used on the bulkhead fittings for the feed line for the external pump. So we use that same sealant here up front, and it's been fine for E85 and gas. So as you can see, we have our sending unit here. We have it wired into after the Russell Y block. This is basically going from the Y block to the back of the passenger side head. That's where this fuel line's going. So we have that installed. And the next thing we got to do is do our wiring. And this is pretty simple. There's basically 4 wires. You really only got to use 3 of them. You got to use red, that's for positive. Black, that's going to be for ground. And then this green wire will eventually feed to one side of the pressure gauge of the sending unit. So it's kind of actually like the hop switch that's right behind it. So basically your green wire is going to come into this, and then the opposite side of this is going to go down to a ground, and I'm probably just going to run it to the same ground that's up here. It's right here by the radiator. Probably use that same ground strap. So I think for today, you know, we're just going to install it and kind of like zip tie it to the windshield wiper and call it a day, because I just need to be able to see that. You know, that's kind of the whole point. So I'll include a link to this gauge setup in the description down below. As you can see, we have the fuel pressure gauge wired up, and I did actually run the power to the illumination just so that way we can see it. And I'll show you guys how I wired it. You know, you plug the harness in the back. The green goes to the one end of the sending unit, the other goes to a ground, so that I ground out down here. The red wire goes down to the alternator plug, just maybe basically any positive 12-volt source, so down to the alternator. The orange I actually wired in with the same terminal ring because I didn't really want to run another one. So I actually tied that to the same positive wire terminal ring. Then the black I just ran, I extended the wire, and that ground is going down here as well. So 2 grounds, 2 positive, and your green wire. So that's pretty much it. And you guys will see that there is a fuel pressure gauge. Now you guys will see this kind of blinking. It's not blinking in real life. It's just what the camera is showing with the LED. So I'm going to attempt to start the car, and hopefully this thing starts, you know, moving around. Alright guys, I'm not sure if you can see that, but it looks like it's got 60 plus PSI. So I don't know if you guys could see in the gauge, but you know, I was revving it to maybe around 3,000 RPM, and it dropped down a little bit, but it wasn't doing that, like, you know, 30 PSI drop like you normally see. But again, these cars are set to 58 PSI, so if we're seeing a little bit over 60, you know, that's not a big deal. Honestly, guys, if this gauge isn't super accurate, that's not a big of a problem. You know, we're just trying to make sure that we're not seeing, you know, fuel pressure going from like 80, or not 80, but 60 to like 20 or 30, you know. That's basically what we're trying to diagnose. And I think we've got a good setup now. We can have something I can monitor. So that's it for the diagnosis part. Now we get to tear the car apart and try to figure out what's going on. We have finished running the power wire for the Racetronix harness. Actually, you can see the little label right here. It says Racetronix. It's kind of below the 2-step and the fuel line. You see the red power supply? That is the line going back to the fuel pump. This right here is a fuse. I just decided to attach it to the same location where the external fuel pump is. I just tied it into the hood latch support, took the 10mm bolt out, backed that out, put the little fuse support, there's a little hole in it, put that in, tighten it back down, then I ran the wire forward, and the wire is running forward. It's underneath this mess of wires here, and it's actually running forward up. They actually gave you a really long length of wire, so I actually ran it forward underneath the alternator and then back. And this probably won't be the final location for the wire, but this red wire right here, that is the positive connection for the alternator power supply for the Racetronix fuel pump harness. Back wire hookup is super simple. All you gotta do is install the jumper harness. What we're going to do here is unplug this harness, plug this in, and then the other section that we need to do, we need to find a ground for this relay, and we should be good to go. I think about using the ground that's up here. I'm shining light on it right now. If I've got room, I will use the same ground. I do have another ground down here where the secondary fuel pump is, but I think the wire harness will fit better if we go up to here. You'll see that I used that common ground up there to not only mount the relay, but also to mount the 2 ground straps behind it. So the fuel tank ground strap is attached behind this relay. Then you've got the ground strap for the actual harness right itself You can't really see it, it's literally behind the relay. That is attached, so it's the 2 ground straps, then the mount for the relay, and the screws going through all 3 of them. So there's that. Then over here, you guys can see that I have attached the jumper harness in between, added the purple safety straps into both. I will say this one right here, this outer one, was a lot harder to get up and around and bent properly to get that safety strap in there. So that hook may or may not last, but you also have the factory one. So if that ever breaks, you can just use replace that with the factory one. Now what I'm gonna do is actually test fire the car and make sure that the fuel pump still works with the power coming directly from the alternator. Alright guys, so the car seems to be firing up, the fuel pump seems to be working. I think we're good to go on this. This may look the same, but actually it's not. We've actually redone a few things back here. First of all, you guys will see that I zip tied the harness for the Racetronix fuel pump control harness. So I zip tied that out of the way because it was kind of flapping around loose. You guys will also see that I've added this Russell, it says flow on it. Well, actually guys, what that is a check valve. So that when we start the car, the fuel can't revert back into the pump. So what happens is the check valve is making the fuel go that way, but the fuel will not, run backwards into the pump, because there is actually a ton of fuel up in this fuel pump. And the third thing you'll notice is that we have this big red wire here. What this is actually the new ground strap for the fuel pump that's right here. What I did was I replaced that short little strand of wire. It was honestly way too thin. I didn't realize it was that thin when I'd created it. But I've tripled the size of the ground. I moved the ground strap from here to up here, and this is gonna be a common ground for the fuel pump, for the stock fuel pump, for the wire harness for the Racetronix, and there's also a ground strap for the fuel filler neck. So, just a couple things there. So we've increased the size of the ground, we've added this check valve, and we basically secured the Racetronix fuel harness. So we should be good. Let's go ahead and try to fire this thing up and see what happens. Alright guys, so we have the fuel gauge plugged in. We're not seeing any fuel pressure drop. The car is idling really rough though. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but maybe we'll show you on the dash. But yeah, you guys see it dropping a little bit, dropping up and down. Now I don't know if that's fuel, air, bad charge. I don't think it's the alternator or battery because we've got plenty of power, but anyway, so I'm not seeing a fuel pressure drop. Now what I've gone ahead and done is unplugged the hop switch. So what we're gonna do here is actually manually fire this thing up. So let's plug this fuse in. All right, so we saw our pressure increase. We've got the hop switch, this thing tricked. And we'll go back here. And you guys can hear the pump. Yeah, it's running. I can actually feel it run. Now let's go ahead and try to disconnect it. There you go, you saw the fuel pressure drop, but it's kind of in line with what we were seeing. And so there you go, that's kind of a diagnosis of what we can do on the lift. I obviously need to put the car back together and take this out on the road. But I think we'll leave that for a separate video just because, it'll help us narrow down what's going on. I hope you guys have found this video informative. I tried to go into in-depth detail on all the stuff that we've tried to fix. And if you guys have any questions, obviously comment down below. I'm always here to reply to your comments. And if you guys want to know where to find all the parts that we've used, I think everything should be available online. We'll drop some links and part numbers down below, and we'll go from there. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. If you want to know when I upload new content, hit the bell notification button down below. And as always, if you want to help support the channel, click all the links down below. Thanks guys, have a great